and welcome to Roli Pulse, a digital initiative from Roli Books. I am Priya Kapoor, the editorial director of Roli Books. Every week, starting today, we will bring to you a dedicated discussion on publishing with some of the finest and most interesting minds from across the industry. Today, we have with us people I admire deeply, starting with Karthika VK, who is publisher Westland, Michel Moushabeck of Interlink, joining us from Boston, Sophy Thompson, publisher and CEO of Thames and Hudson, joining us from London, and Kapoor, director at Roli Books. Engaging them in conversation is Amit Varma, the force behind one of my most favorite podcasts, The Seen and the Unseen. Amit is a writer and podcaster based in Mumbai. He's been a journalist for over 2 decades and won the Bastiat Prize for Journalism twice in 2007 and 2015. He is a columnist for the Times of India, amongst others. And along with hosting India's most popular weekly podcast, he also teaches the online course, The Art of Clear Writing. This promises to be a fascinating discussion. I want to thank all my panelists and thank you, Amit, and I'm going to hand over to you now.
Thank you, Priya, and welcome to Roli Pulse. I'm Amit Varma, and my guests today are Sophy Thompson, Karthika VK, Michel Moushabeck, and Kapoor, all of whom are publishing stalwarts. Now, in today's session, we'll chat about how the business of publishing will be affected by the ongoing pandemic of COVID-19, but not just the business of publishing, which sounds impersonal and distant, but the habit of reading. Will we read more because we are locked down more? Will we buy less books because we get out more? Will we buy less books because in these uncertain times, we will cut down on discretionary spending? Or will we buy more books because reading helps us both escape the world and make sense of it? And in these changing times, both escape and enlightenment are necessary. We shall see how our 4 guests, not just publishers, but voracious readers themselves, think of this. Before we get down to discussing specific aspects of publishing in the times of COVID, I'd like our guests to briefly tell us about what they have been up to in this lockdown and how worried they are about what COVID-19 could do to publishing. Let me call upon Sophy first. Sophy is the CEO of Thames and Hudson, a leading publisher of illustrated books with a vast experience in the publishing industry. Sophy, over to you.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. It's obviously been an incredibly challenging time. Here in the UK, we've been in lockdown now for 4 weeks, since the 23rd of March. So we're beyond our first month, and it's beginning to feel that way. I think, like everybody, the initial week or so was incredibly grueling and a real trial, in as much as we were trying to absorb so much information from the outside world and at the same time make this absolutely extraordinary accelerated transition from running a company in a physical space to running a virtual company. We've been a little bit sort of relieved that our company slogan from the just the post-war years was always a museum without walls. So we've been trying to create an office without walls. And I've just been astounded and amazed at, with the work and the hours that it took, how extraordinarily adaptable people are. And here we are 4 weeks in, and everything is signed electronically, everything is circulated electronically. We're in touch with all of our authors. It doesn't seem to have age barriers or obviously no geographical barriers. And there are so many silver linings. So it's been a precipitous route of discovery, is what I would say, over the last month. Unexpected, surprising, exhausting. But I'm beginning to feel that we're settling into a new rhythm now, which is beginning to make some sort of sense.
I'll turn to Michel now. Michel Moushabeck is, a man of many parts. He is the founder of Interlink Publishing, which is a 33-year-old independent publishing house. But he's also a traveler and a musician. He's written a photographic book on Kilimanjaro. And Michel, I came across this very moving video of you recently, I think posted at the start of April, where your grandkid was born. And, we are in social distancing now, and you couldn't actually see him in person. So you saw him through this, saw your grandchild through this window and read out something from a book to the kid. It must have been hard. How has it been for you, in lockdown? And given also that you love to travel, you love to play music, they're all such social activities, and now you have to sort of stay away from all of that.
Yes, we've been under lockdown now for a little over 5 weeks, and I never thought that the day will come when I would say that leaf raking has become the highlight of my day. It's, and thank you for inviting me today, because this was, you've given me a reason to actually shave and look decent today. But our hearts and minds are preoccupied and heavy with uncertainty. We see places of worship without worshipers. We see airports without travelers. We see grocery stores without groceries. And yes, we see bookshops also without book lovers, and libraries closed down. And the effects of this public health crisis is hitting the publishing industry very hard, with author tour cancellations, declining bookstore sales, bookstores are shut down. Of course, also just before the lockdown, we have received nearly 20 spring summer titles that have just come off the press. And we were faced with cancellation of orders from independent booksellers. And in addition to that, the big giant that we've depended on for decades, Amazon, put a hold on orders in order to prioritize toilet paper and household goods and whatnot, which really made us rethink our business models and the way we do business going forward. But life must go on. Life must go on from this point on, and independent booksellers and bookshops need to start thinking outside the box and rethink those models that we have depended on for years or in the past. So I will let others speak and will continue with my ideas as to how we should perform and our priority at the moment is really to support our staff, to support our writers, and to serve our reading and book loving community as best we can.
Thanks for that. I'll turn to VK Karthika now, and Karthika has been, she's currently the publisher at Westland, but before this she's been a stalwart who started in Penguin in the mid 1990s, went on to HarperCollins and so on. And Karthika, from what I know of you, for you the joy of publishing is not just about reading and discovering books, but also meeting writers. You know, you're all the time sort of meeting writers, persuading them to write for you and all of that. And that social aspect of the business must have completely died for you in the last month and a half, hasn't it?
It's a mixed answer to that, actually, because one of the things that I've discovered is how enormously adaptable everyone is. And that goes for our authors as well. There are people who were shy of technology, who didn't really want to experiment with social media. All of them have broken through and said, well, if not now, when? And so they've all reached out. They're working with our social media teams, with our marketing team, trying to keep the conversation about books alive. And that kind of commitment to what they do and finding ways to extend it, that has really added to our world at the moment, despite the fact that we're not physically able to meet each other. But Amit, also, I think this has been personally for me a time when the main realization really is of how enormously privileged we are. We as in publishing people whose lives depend on reading and writing as opposed to daily work for which we are no longer being paid, or people who, well, I could have been an athlete. I could have needed a basketball team to keep my life going, and I don't have to worry about that. I can actually sit here and work all day on editing and reading and, you know, creating ideas for books with my writers. So it is that too, that in India, where we see these kinds of differences and the horror of so much that's been going around us because of this lockdown, we've actually been very easily sort of adapting to what we have because we have the means to do it. And this, again, I'm conscious of the fact that I'm speaking as a publisher who has so-called big publishing sort of support. The big problem is obviously going to be about the smaller, less financially sort of supported organizations and how they're going to survive. So it feels like a time when, on the one hand, there's so much that's changing around us. On the other, there's great opportunity to think about things together. For instance, there's at least a couple of groups that have been thriving on Google and on WhatsApp, where publishers and writers and people are talking to each other and saying, what can we do? How can we do things differently? And sharing experiences. And I think that coming together as a community of finding what our priorities should be together, rather than the conventional divide of, we will talk to only certain kinds of people and publishers and distributors, etc. All that seems to have melted down a little bit. And it is an unexpectedly happy place to find ourselves in that respect. While all the other troubles are still out there, the economy is a huge problem, obviously, and we don't even know what world we're going to step into after this. Who knows, as you said in the beginning, are they going to read books at all? Are they going to want to spend money on something that is not about feeding oneself and putting one's kids through school and college? Is this going to be a superfluous thing, and is it going to suffer for that? Or have people discovered in this time that really there are some things that are really valuable in life, and one of those things is writing and reading, and we really need to pay a lot more attention to that as just like ordinary people, not people necessarily engaged in the business of writing or reading. I think I'll leave it there for the moment.
What you said about privilege really resonates, because the ironic truth is that in India, not just publishers, but anyone who reads also is incredibly privileged. Yeah. And, that is something that this ongoing sort of pandemic really drives home. My next guest is Kapil Kapoor, who is the managing director at Roli Books. Before that, he worked at Phaidon Press in London. Before that, he did a publishing course at Columbia University and an undergraduate degree at London School of Economics. So he's an economist as well. And he's also a director at CMYK, which is India's only dedicated art and illustrated chain of bookshops. Now, Kapil, it seems to me that, what you guys at Roli are doing with with these ongoing online interactions and all of that is that you actually adapted very quickly to what's been happening. So tell me about how the last few weeks have been for you, and what your thoughts have been on what you should do in this time.
Thank you, Amit. So I'll just go back about 2 weeks before the lockdown actually started, and we were preparing to attend a major book fair, a London book fair, and we were sort of right in the midst of with a lot of preparation, because it's a big event for us. And when that got cancelled, or even before it actually officially got cancelled, there were a lot of meetings that were being called off, and it was quite evident that the event would not take place. I think those were the first signs to us that things are not normal, and things are going to change quite drastically. And I think 2 weeks after that, things moved quite rapidly in India. Before we could really get our heads around what was happening, there was a new development every day. There was, it started off by, having our employees work from home, and just the whole operational aspects of that, and trying to figure out how we can get everyone to efficiently work from home. Just when we sort of settled down into that, then there was the official lockdown that was announced. Now, soon after that, it became apparent that we can't trade in books anymore, and there won't be any avenues for distribution and sales and so on. So I think we were sort of playing catch up in the first few days, really just trying to figure out how we will, really operate as a publishing company. And I think one of the good things that came out of this is that I think it was maybe a day or two before the official lockdown was announced, we had an all-staff meeting, and just to sort of hear everyone's views and to understand, there was a lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty, just to assure everybody of what's, that we're all in this together, and, we're a support group and we can talk to each other. In that, one of the things that came out collectively is that there has to be, we have to stay positive, and there has to be some opportunity that comes out of this as well. And if we can sort of keep thinking about what are the positives that can come out of this time, then maybe we'll be in a better place. So one of the things that was quite apparent, and became even more so when the book sales stopped, is that the only channel that was open for communication was the digital channel to us. And like Karthika said, it was to create, to keep our readers engaged, to keep the conversation going, just to keep our editors in a creative space, to try and do something digitally, to create some programming that we could put out. And this is in context of an ongoing discussion that we have been having at Roli for, I would say, about 6 to 9 months, maybe even close to a year, where we've been really eager to do something in the digital space. But I think it was one of those conversations where in the day-to-day, busy lives that we have, publishing and selling books, it wasn't gathering much steam. And I think this kind of fast forwarded everything, and we said, well, this is the only conversation we can be having right now. So there came, out of that came out Roli Pulse, something where we feel at the moment, it's a lot of discussions, it's a lot of live panels. Some are quite heavy topics, some are quite light and entertaining. So we try and keep it quite mixed, but yeah, this is what's been keeping us busy in the last sort of couple of weeks. But I would agree with all of the previous three speakers to say we've had, it's been a roller coaster. There are days where we're very anxious. We're worried about, the business of our business. We're worried about the economy. We're worried about our staff. There are other days where we're extremely positive and we think that, there has to be, we have to think out of the box, like Michel said. Maybe some of the things that we were previously quite close to, we should start thinking about that now. And that has to do with formats of publishing, that has to do with, our distribution methods, everything really, and I think this has given us, one thing it has given us is time to really reflect and think, and which we don't have the privilege of on a normal working day. So I think that is the positive that's come out of this. Having said that, there is a lot of anxiety and there's a lot of uncertainty going forward. I mean, the question everyone asks right now is that, how will books be perceived, especially in India going forward? I mean, will there be something where there'll be a lot of pent-up demand for, and as things open up, people have spent these last few weeks really discovering things that they are interested in, and maybe putting aside. So maybe there is a real surge in book sales when things open. That's one line of thought which I would like to believe. On the other hand, the reality is that maybe it's a luxury and there are other things that people need to worry about. So we really don't know. And I think it's just one of those quite dynamic situations that we have to, just react to and adapt to. So yeah, I think I would leave it there for now, but that's really where we have been in the last sort of, few weeks.
Sophy, you want to add to that?
Yes, I mean, I think we've been seeing in Europe recently, they've started announcing the transition and the exit strategies for Germany, Italy, France, and other very key territories for our sales, because the art book travels, across all continents, and that's a wonderful thing. And I think it's something to hold on to, that Germany and Italy, both the first to go, prioritize bookshops. These were seen and perceived as being an essential part of the landscape that needed to be there and accessible to the readers and the buying public, those who can afford and can continue to read. So I thought that was incredibly heartening for us to see. And in France, I was following this over the weekend. The very first large company grant that the French government gave didn't go to Air France, and it didn't go to Renault. It went to the Fnac chain, which is where, the 200, sort of almost 200 key bookshops across France. So it feels that within this landscape, to hear from these governments of powerful countries articulating the importance of the bookshop, to me would suggest that they are recognizing and sort of, yes, communicating the fact that books are an essential, important prop, and perhaps more so than they have been in a sort of wealth of other consumer goods. But that this, to me, were very, very strong messages. I'm not so sure that the British or the American governments will follow suit. Michel would know as good as well as me. I'm not sure that Donald Trump or Boris Johnson are going to say hooray for the bookshops, but I love that core sort of respect of intellectual pursuit and the importance of books within Europe. I think it's a wonderful thing to see highlighted in the current circumstances.
That's a revelation to me as well. I'm not sure that we'll see a similar kind of commitment towards books in India either. But one of the dangers that I think panels like this face for the regular listener is if we give in to the curse of knowledge and assume that the listener already has all the background information that you guys do as publishers. So before we move forward talking about how publishing is going to be impacted by COVID, I just want to turn to Karthika, who's you've been in mainstream publishing your entire career, and ask you to sum it up if you can. What publishing was like before COVID struck? What were the challenges? Was it healthy? People often have perceptions that people they nowadays read much less, which you've mentioned before is not quite true. People have this perception that everything is shifting to ebooks, which again you've pointed out is not quite true. So can you just sort of lay out how publishing was doing before this pandemic struck? Was it healthy? What were the sort of opportunities ahead?
This is exactly what I was thinking, Amit, that before this happened, I think all of us as publishers in India were struggling to keep that optimism alive, to say that, yes, books are doing better, that people are reading more. And we didn't quite believe it ourselves. We try, and we kept saying that things will get better. But there were so many challenges, so many difficulties. This had to do with distribution. This has to do with the way our books reach readers, our inability to go straight to the market easily in such a large country. And export hasn't been a very big part of our system in terms of trade publishing. I know that there are specialized publishers who do a lot of business outside India, but for a lot of English language trade books and in other languages in India, it's the immediate market that counts. And the immediate market has been not as excited about books as we would have liked them to be. So we were actually wondering how to make things better. What can we do to improve the situation? Yes, as you pointed out, ebooks are there in the market. There are people who are buying and reading ebooks, but the physical book remains the core of our trade. So it seemed in a way that we were reaching a point where we had to do something drastic to take it up to the next level. What we didn't expect, I think, was that this would come along and we would be looking somewhere else entirely for survival rather than for going up to the next level. So it is not a very easy situation. I think what we're going to end up seeing is every single problem that we already had being magnified manyfold. It would be not impossible to think that there are very good people, very good players in the marketplace who might need to fall off the map or lose. And there will definitely be a slowdown in terms of people being able to commit to numbers, being able to have the confidence to say, yes, we will do so many books, so much sale, the volumes, the ability to reach places where, for instance, what if this idea of the hotspot continues to be something that's going to bother us for several months? What if we will not be able to get books to, say, 15 key points in this country? Then for how long will the market be able to sustain? And we have to go through at some points to reach other points. What if we can't take books via those places? So it's like a big blank slate at the moment. We don't know. And the interesting thing is that, as I said, the difficulties of distribution, the difficulties of pricing. This is an old problem, right? People just don't want to pay more for books. I'm imagining that they would pay for the Thames and Hudson books, but they're not going to pay for a 300-page novel any more than they were paying for it 3 years, 5 years, 7 years ago, which is a big shame. They should know that inflation does happen and prices go up, and they should be willing to pay more, but they're not. So we're living in a bit of a sort of limbo here, and we have been for a while, wishing we could break through, which is why I see this as an opportunity. I mean, if we can't come out of something like this with our heads held high, with a better strategy for survival and growth, then this would have been a wasted moment. So I think it's important for us to think about it as something that allows us to rethink and to find ways forward that will make the industry stronger in the long run.
And you mentioned the small businesses falling off the map, and I want to sort of turn to Michel with my next question, which is that what we are seeing increasingly across the world is that across sectors, what you have is you have big mainstream chains sort of consolidating, but the independent guys going out of business. Like in the restaurant business in the US, for example, there is worry that, because their margins are so small, being shut for a month means a lot of the independent guys who are doing amazingly creative stuff and using local cuisines and all that just die. And all the big chains kind of survive. Now, Michel, you run an independent publishing house yourself. What is your worry? Like, is it going to be much harder for the independents to get through this?
I mean, of course, as we know and as we've heard, over the past several months, several weeks, that large multinational corporations, large businesses are getting government bailouts, airlines, cruise ships, so on and so forth. But it's not going to trickle down to independent publishers like us. We certainly haven't seen it. And we have really tried very, very hard over the past month to do everything we can to keep going while keeping, without having to lay off or furlough any of our dedicated staff who've been working with us for so many years. I mean, running an independent publishing house is in and of itself a major challenge, but we have a huge advantage over mainstream publishers and larger firms in the sense that we are able to adapt more quickly to changes around us in our environment, to what's going on. And of course, our biggest challenge has always been that we are understaffed and we are overworked, but we wouldn't have it any other way. We are passionate about books and about writing, and we publish amazing books that challenge the norm, books that inform and entertain, and books that transport you to places far away and introduce readers to new novelists, leading novelists from other countries or young voices and from around the world. We also publish enchanting children's books and cookbooks, award-winning cookbooks that double as cultural guides, so that we ensure that you eat well as well. So, but the main thing that came out of this crisis is really, for us as independent publishers, is to really work hard at reducing our dependence on Amazon and on large chains. And that's what we have tried to do over the past month, is really to think outside the box. And one way of doing it, which has served us well and has been quite successful over the past month, is expanding our direct-to-consumer sales. And because bookshops are closed and museum gift shops are closed and libraries are closed and Amazon is not selling our books, we've had to do something in order to survive. And that's one thing we were able to do. And so in the past, we used to send one e-newsletter per month. Now we are sending at least 2 per week. And we're sending those, we're leveraging our immediate community and engaging people in the community and supporting worthy causes like giving free books to children in need, working with local bookshops on GoFundMe campaigns where they are able to purchase books from us, make money themselves, and donate the books to children in need. That's one project that we have done successfully with the local bookshops. We have created an affiliate program for independent bookshops, in the sense that, because right now bookshops have no income coming to them, one way we have helped them, or we're trying to help them, is with an affiliate program whereby we're providing them with a lot of creative assets that they can use on their social media platforms. And if they send customers to our website and purchase our books, they will automatically get a 30% commission. And they will get the money within 24 hours from us receiving those orders from customers from anywhere. So all customers have to do is put the name of their local bookshop at checkout, and the local bookshop would get 30% commission. That's another idea that we have done. We have rolled out gift cards for customers who have already bought what they could this past month to support us, but they may want to buy gift cards for future holidays and so on and so forth. We are building an ecosystem of support, really along many different lines. We're starting digital story times and read aloud children's book series. We're doing author talks. We've asked all our authors to send us short video clips talking about their books. We're doing video interviews with authors, cooking demonstrations with our cookbook authors. We're providing people with free recipes once a week, for stay-at-home recipes, and Zoom book groups, and so on and so forth. So all this has happened, in the past few weeks, and we are seeing really an amazing support, and from our book-loving community who have come through for us this past month. Whether this is going to last, into the future, we don't know. It's questionable. But at the moment, we are receiving support. We are going on with our publishing program. We're being productive. We are looking at a very strong fall season as far as publishing. But of course, there are many, many challenges to come, and there's going to be some intense pain in the publishing industry overall.
Kapil, I want to come to you with a follow-up question. Like what Michel was just saying is very inspiring, and what it seems has happened because of this crisis is that normally publishers don't have a direct interface with the readers. They are, there are intermediaries like retailers and bookshops and book critics and whatever. In different ways, there are different intermediaries between the publishers and readers. And what it seems, what technology is supposed to do is cut away some of the intermediaries, but that seems to have been slower in happening in publishing than in other fields. And a lot of what Michel has been saying is building that direct interface between the publisher and the reader. And it seems to me that you guys at Roli, with initiatives like this, are also sort of trying to do that. Any thoughts on that?
No, absolutely. I think Michel said it perfectly, and it mirrors our thoughts at Roli as well. I wouldn't use the word cut out intermediaries, because for us, the intermediaries are very important. So we would like to collaborate with them, strengthen the ecosystem, because without independent bookstores, I would say even without the online bookstores, we all need to work together. So what we at Roli think is imperative is, traditionally most publishing companies, and I would say especially Roli Books, we were a B2B company where we would publish books, and our marketing, all of our trade marketing efforts would be towards other trade partners. We would ensure that bookstores had all the best information about our books. We would try and get our new publishing in the front of the stores. Any kind of marketing initiatives we would do would largely be focused around our trade partners. whether those are online retailers or offline. So I think what's been clear for a few months, maybe even a couple of years, but especially in this situation, is that we do need to get closer to our readers. We need to become more of a consumer-facing entity, move from a B2B sort of company to a B2C company, not so much where we are selling directly to customers. Of course, that's always welcome, but that's not our number one aim. It is to create demand, it is to create awareness, it is to create interest in our books with marketing initiatives. And of course, digital is a big enabler in that. And I think in the last few weeks, we have really learned and upskilled ourselves in that department, where we feel that the closer we are to our reading audience, because I do very strongly feel that that demand for books will never go down. That hunger for what we do, I would like to believe, even though maybe it's a bit, in an ideal world, but I would like to continue to believe that there is a lot of demand for our books. I think what was fragile even before COVID was our entire distribution system. It was, it was already under some pain. And I think, as Karthika mentioned, that now this has only magnified those problems. So we do have to think out of the box. There is a responsibility of the publisher that, which goes beyond just publishing a very good book. I think we need to try and reach our audience that much more effectively and create a demand which independent booksellers in particular should be able to benefit out of. So I think that's really where all the things Michel mentioned are fantastic initiatives, because what it's essentially doing is creating this demand for the books that we publish, making sure that people know about them, and then they go to the, as things open up and whichever avenues are open, they go to their local booksellers or bookshops and buy those books.
Right, and Sophie, I want to come to you with a question here, because it seems that there's an added nuance to your situation, in the sense that one of the things that people are speculating will happen post the lockdown is that because of these uncertain times, we will all cut down on discretionary spending. Now, and this is a question for both you and Kapil, I guess, that, since you guys do illustrated books, more of coffee table books, they are naturally more expensive than, your typical airport bestseller and all that. Is that something that worries you, or do you feel that because of the bleakness around, that the market for those books will actually be greater? I mean, how do you look at that problem?
I think it's such an important question, and one that all publishers really are asking themselves, hopefully before the virus, and it's just amplified the need. And I think at Thames and Hudson, I'd always sort of shunned the idea of the coffee table book. To me, there's an element of frivolity or not, lack of seriousness in that. And really what we've done over the last 70 years is build a library of very long-selling, important books about art, about archaeology, about cultural history. And what I've discovered is, if you take them from the larger, more expensive formats and take the text and take the illustrations and put them into smaller reading formats, which is what I've been doing over the last 4 or 5 years, and even down into the paperbacks for some of these key texts, people will read them. So they're not just about show-off, aspirational positioning. It's true that some of the architectural, the fashion, the photography monographs are high-priced, but I feel that it's again one of these opportunities where we're saying we've got to look at the content and make it accessible, make it relevant. How useful is it? How relevant is it? And knowing the consumer in that regard is very important. So there, and the museums that we work with all across Europe, and we do a lot of work with the British Museum, the Victoria and Albert. You can't speak to an artist or an author, a photographer, an architect, or a museum curator without their wanting a physical legacy of their work. And that really it's not as price sensitive. So it's not, I want another handbag and I want another beautiful book. It really is, I believe in this photographer. I think their work is extraordinary and I will follow them. So I think one of the shifts, and it's interesting in what Michel was saying, also the access to the consumer, but one of the initiatives we've started is a more discreet crowdfunding platform, which will help, I think, if discretionary spending, if it's not just an impulse buy walking into a museum shop or into a bookstore, but where there is a photographer or an architect or a graphic designer or somebody whose work we feel is absolutely valid, but we're not quite sure who the consumer is. I think through these outreach sort of pre-funded sites, a bit like a Kickstarter, equivalent to a Kickstarter, is a way of sustaining the kind of publishing we do, and help and asking, in fact, the audience to help us sustain the books for those artists and creatives that we want to showcase and provide with what we think is so important, which is this curated physical legacy of their work, which seems so vital in a world where the ephemerality of the online world is just, we see it, we're bombarded with the noise on social media. And if you've spent 5 years putting an exhibition together, knowing that it's online isn't really enough. You know, you want it physically to be recorded and logged somewhere. So I think we are confident, I'm confident that we do have to be careful. I think we're thinking very hard about what is this book? Is it relevant? Is it useful? And sometimes the price point isn't the most important issue when asking that question. It's really, do we think that the world needs this book? You know, and is there an audience there that would have a better enhanced experience by owning that book? And those, I think, are important questions for all publishers, and perhaps even more relevant in visual publishing, because it's so expensive to make the books, you can't afford to make the mistakes.
Kapil, any comments about the Indian context of this?
Yeah, I think here we like to believe the same things that Sophy is mentioning, that there are certain topics and certain creators which deserve a physical book, and you just cannot translate that into either a smaller format or a digital format. So we would continue to publish those books. I don't, maybe in the short term, we might push some of those books into a future date, but I don't think, well, at least as of now, we don't believe that we will stop doing those books or drastically reduce those. I think there is the importance on the content and the material in it is very, very important. And I think that will continue. I don't think the demand for that, at least in the medium to long term, should change because of the current crisis. So that will definitely continue. But I think I come back to what I said previously. I think the bigger challenge is not so much about price points and formats, but is really about reaching the right audience with those books. And I think that's where we have to take that lead and make sure that the people that we publish that book for get to find out that book has been published. So I think, and then once they know about it, they will definitely appreciate and buy it. So I think that's our challenge. And I think there we have a lot of tools, at our disposal. And we, as publishers, we just need to get better at them. We need to learn about those and just become a lot better in terms of a marketing machine to help our authors get their books to the final audience.
So, as we enter the last lap of this session, I'd like to ask each of my guests in turn 2 questions. One is that, is there something you've learned about publishing in the last month and a half from what has been happening in this lockdown? Like, have any of your prior beliefs been challenged, or a hunch you had been confirmed? Is there a new learning you can share with us about your business and the habit of reading, in fact? And secondly, just looking ahead from the point of view of your work, what gives you hope and what gives you despair? We'll start with Karthika.
What have I learned? I think, Amit, what I've understood is that there are 2 parts to what we do. One is what we do, what we think we need to do and believe in. And the second part of it is the world out there and the perception it has of what we do. For instance, this conversation we had about the government thinking that bookshops are important and essential, and therefore that gives us hope. And the rest of India hasn't done this, but Kerala has. And in Kerala, they have said bookshops can open 2 days a week, which then gives us hope, which gives hope for the business as well. And one has to think that if that is possible in one state in the country, hopefully that is something that can someday take over the rest of the country as well, in terms of the understanding of what books mean, what publishing can do, and why books continue to be essential and they cannot be secondary to toilet paper, really. The second part of that perception is also that it's not enough for us to hope for that perception, but that we've got to really work towards it. And while we've never really lobbied very hard for anything in very effective ways in the publishing industry, I think it's becoming more and more clear that we need industry bodies, organizations, publishers, everyone to fight the battle for that perception and to make it clear that if we have to render something that is actually a very essential civilizational project effectively, then we need very clear government support. We need clear support from people, and this is not to be taken lightly. We need to make this happen. If these things can be worked towards effectively, then I think there's plenty of room for hope. And if we do not succeed in doing this, despite the crisis that has hit us, then one really must despair and think, if not possible at this point, then is there going to be any time where this is going to be possible for us? I think it's a testing time, it's a crucial time, and we need to put our backs to this. The other part of it, which again is a bit of a realization, is that actually people just have to be perhaps directed towards some of the things that we would like them to do. And we need to work our marketing and sort of public statements about publishing to go in that direction. By this, I mean, for instance, that it's been heartening to see people go back to the written word and the read word. One of the biggest problems in recent years for India has been that everybody wants to see celebrity writers. Everybody wants to hear them talk about their lives, but not perhaps to read the words that they've written. And this lockdown, because it means people have to actually turn to the written word, has meant that we are encountering reactions of, I'm enjoying this. And it's not just enough for me to watch videos and films and shows. I feel like writing gives me something more important, that going back to books and longer reading is something that I am glad to have rediscovered. So maybe that other favorite project of all publishers around the world, which is to bring the lapsed reader back to reading, maybe this is the time when we will get some of them back for us. That definitely gives me hope for the future.
Michel?
Yes, it's. I do agree with everything that said. I hope that people are rediscovering the joy of reading while staying at home. In truth, it's not really clear to anyone where this crisis is leading us. When will we be able to emerge from our homes? What is the path forward? Even when the lockdown ends, will book lovers feel comfortable about walking into a bookshop or browsing in a bookshop? I have no doubt that once the crisis is over, the world and its economy is going to revive very quickly. But I also know that before this happens, there's going to be a period of hardship, a period of as I said, intense pain. And I fear that many in our industry may not be able to weather the storm. Smaller independent bookshops, smaller independent publishers. But the one thing that I've learned from this crisis more than anything else is that publishing has always been and will always be a collaborative business, you know, and as we all know, I can't stress this enough, the importance of working together. We all acquire rights from each other. We do co-editions with each other. We We do joint print runs and to bring our costs down. We support each other in so many other ways. And I think three of us on this panel, with Sophy and Kapil, we belong to an international publishers group called Motovan that's been going on for nearly 45 years, where we always have helped each other throughout crisis, help each other publish important books that perhaps were not economically feasible if one publisher would do them by themselves, and so on and so forth. So it is really a collaborative effort, always has been, always will be. Publishers Weekly started trending a hashtag, books are essential, and it's going viral. And we have added to that, independent publishers are essentials. This is another hashtag to highlight the role of that books play in our society, in the health of the global culture, and so on. So I know that that the written world will survive, that printed books will survive, and independent publishers and independent booksellers will also survive in the long run. My worry is the immediate, very, very short run at the moment.
Sophy, what about you?
Yeah, I agree. I think it would be absolutely wrong to only look at the silver linings. I think from the despair point of view, the virus in so many countries has just shown into sharp relief the inequalities and the terrible poverty. Also in the rich Western countries and America not least, just the desperation and the level of work that people are having to sort of go through just to survive. And I think that the fact that there is no bubble, publishing isn't a bubble, we're not protected. And whether it's the virus and we've had over the last year just an extraordinary set of circumstances just for Thames and Hudson, but for so many companies. We've had the riots in Hong Kong, we've had the riots in France, the Gilets jaunes, we've had this terrible Brexit background of uncertainty in the UK. We've had Trump tweeting tariffs, which impact people's lives, the way we price books, everything. So that we're not protected. There's no, we're as exposed as everybody else to a hard reality out there, but we're immensely privileged within that harsh reality in comparison to these frontline workers and the future unemployed. So I think it's a moment of recognition, of looking at the world, and this global view as well. We can see what's happening in every country through every television channel, and we know what's happening, and it's pretty frightening. So I think that's the negative, but it must be a positive as well. And I come back to this word, how relevant can we remain, and that's our duty, and it's due to be relevant to the in our world, the artists and creators who, since the beginning of humankind, storytelling and making art are just natural responses. That's what we need to exist, and we're so lucky to work with the people who are the conduits for those very deep and sort of absolutely inherent forms of expression, and we need to be here and keep doing it, as with all the creative arts. But I agree with Michel, it's going to be one hell of a struggle, and we'll lose some very wonderful people, businesses and visions along the way. That's going to happen. I don't think we should, pretend that it won't. And it's, it is a struggle just to hold on to staff at the moment. It's a struggle to run any company with no revenue. And I agree, with Michel again. We're not going to have a public out browsing happily by the end of this year for the holiday season. That's not going to happen. And the duration of this is real and for the future, months and years. But we have resilience, and so those things of creating and storytelling, they're never going to go. Absolutely not. So we can hold on to that.
Hopeful words, Kapil.
I guess I'll start with the despair first. I think, it's, I think I agree with Michel that the despair is in the short term. I think I don't think our government is going to do much to support publishing and publishers, or at least not yet, and I don't see that coming despite our best efforts. So I think in the short term, we will see some pain all across the ecosystem of publishing and bookselling. And that is quite that's quite sad, and that's something that worries me personally. But having said that, I think you asked, what have we learned in this time and what gives us hope? I think the two of those things for me are similar, combined. What we've learned is that everyone who works in publishing and is extremely passionate about what we do. I mean, we found this in just what we're doing at Roli. People are extremely committed, are extremely passionate, very resilient, very dedicated to the cause, really. And the cause is putting out the best knowledge out into the world. And that's what gives me hope, because we're going to continue doing that. And despite all the odds, we believe that will always continue. Like Sophy said, storytelling and creating will never, ever become irrelevant. We just need to find ways of, overcoming this current challenge, and believe that will go on forever. And the other hopeful part is that, maybe there was a status quo in the way things were done in publishing, and we just kind of adapted towards it. And maybe this is the time that we're really going to shake things up. And I think we're all going to come out better for having done that. So I think that's also hopeful, because sometimes it takes something like this for people to really, go back to the drawing board and collaborative efforts. I think that's another theme that was mentioned, is that we come together and, I think Karthika will agree that there are a lot of times where we work independently of each other, and especially in Indian publishing. And I think maybe this is a time that we need to all put our minds together, brainstorm, and ensure that we overcome this current crisis.
I'm actually not surprised at all that there were so many notes of hope struck in this discussion, despite the fact that times are so bleak and there seems to be a lot of cause for despair, because every publisher I have met in person has struck me as someone driven not just by profit and loss and hey, it's a business and we want to make some money, but also by this deeper passion, which is very similar to the passion a lot of readers in fact feel for reading, and long may that continue. Thank you to all of you for your for all the insight you shared with us, and to all the listeners, thank you for joining us for this discussion. Please follow Roli Books on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram for updates on more such activities from Roli Pulse. Stay well and #believe in books.
Thanks, Amit.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Great
Thanks,
to see you all.
Roli.